Welcome back to the series that focuses on the persona of each of the P3 main characters and how it relates to the mythological figure it's based on. In this video, I'll be covering the personas of the last two Strega members, Jin's Moros and Takaya's Hypnos. Now let's dive right in. So, since P3 is a game all about death, I thought it makes sense to discuss Strega in the order of their demise. And since we already covered Chirori in a previous video, we'll be starting off with Jin's Moros in this one. So, Moros was a primordial entity known as the Greek god of impending doom. As the offspring of Nyx, the personification of the night, or aka Death in P3's lore, he was responsible for driving mortals to their deadly fate. Now, some myths state he's also the offspring of Erebus, aka the personification of darkness, but most state he was fatherless and was born just by Nyx herself. Moros was responsible for the general misfortune a person might encounter in life, such as the loss of a loved one, financial hardship, and etc. He would basically carve a path for a person to follow towards their tragic fate. He was also the brother to the Moirai, aka the three goddesses of destiny, and often directed their actions since he was the older sibling. The heroes and common folk would do all they could to ignore Moros in the hopes that they could avoid bad things from happening to them. However, this was often difficult since he could turn himself invisible and was essentially considered inevitable. In some way or another, he would bring misfortune to his victims. As we can see, Jin's role in the story takes quite a bit of inspiration from this Greek god. His work towards the arrival of Nyx, and therefore the encroaching end to humanity, reflects how Moros would craft a tragic path for a person. It was Jin who helped carve a path of impending doom for others via the internet in P3. He set up the Revenge Request website, where people could submit names of those they'd like to see assassinated. And later on, during the month of January, Fuka took notice of a popular screen name online who was incredibly successful at converting people to Nyx's cult. It should have come as no surprise that Jin was behind it all. It's also fitting that Moros is tied to the three goddesses of fate, since the arrival of Nyx meant death in P3's lore, and the arcana reveals that death comes for all people in the end. Jin does all he can to help our reverse fortune arcana Takaya achieve his dream as well, but what's most interesting to me is Moros' ability to turn invisible in the mythos. In a similar light, to the best of his ability, Jin draws the least amount of attention to his own presence so that Takaya's can be elevated. He's content to be the man behind the scenes so that Takaya can shine as the charismatic figure who spreads the word of Nyx's salvation. This solitary tendency fits well with Jin's reverse arcana, the Hermit, which you can learn more about in the video linked in the cards above. As for his persona's physical design, in all honesty, it can be hard to find a mythological connection on first glance. But if we settle on Moros' relation to the Moirai and their knowledge of fate, then the satellite imagery of the persona begins to make sense. For example, NASA satellites are able to capture a bird's eye view of Earth and send back this outer-worldly information to scientists who wouldn't have been able to capture it otherwise. Similarly, Jin bestows otherworldly info of Nyx's coming to the world. Now, moving on to the moveset of Moros, the emphasis on fire and dark skills during the first encounter reflects the mythological figure's role in leading others to a terrible fate. fire and darkness are usually associated with destruction, with Mudun literally causing an insta-kill if it lands. Moros' expanded skill set in January just goes to show that he has an even larger arsenal of methods to defeat his enemies now. No matter what element they may be weak to, whether that be fire, electricity, wind, or whatever else, Moros can summon it to knock them down. And at last, it's time to wrap up our big bad trio. Actually, let's face it, they're the easiest antagonists to destroy in the entire series. But without further ado, let's talk about Takaya's persona, Hypnos. So, in Greek mythology, Hypnos was the god associated with sleep. Makes sense that sleep-inducing drugs are called hypnotics, right? Like Moros, his mother was Nyx, and Erebus was stated to be his father. The most interesting relation, however, is his twin brotherhood to Thanatos, the Greek god of non-violent deaths, or aka the real form of Roji Mochizuki, the realized death arcana, prior to his farewell at the end of December. Hypnos lived with his brother in complete silence within dark caves that received no sunlight or moonlight. I think it's quite easy to see how Takaya's role reflects this mythology. The relation to Nyx is pretty obvious, and it makes sense that Takaya is the figurative twin brother to Roji, as both are working towards bringing about the fall. Hypnos having to dwell in pitch-black caves with death as his only companion is reflected in Takaya's horrible childhood under the experimentation of the Kirijo group. Since he grew up with death as a constant threat, and continues to do so due to his terminal condition, of course he has no fear of the end. Plus, as the god associated with sleep, Takaya puts many individuals to rest for their final time, which tragically includes our dear boy Shinji. He also causes humanity to fall asleep to their daily lives in the lead-up to the climax of the game. Many people were led astray to the cult of Nyx and became completely apathetic as they waited for the end of the world. Takaya's actions in battle are reminiscent of the mythos as well, since he clutches his head and momentarily falls into what seems like a painful rest. He essentially sleeps, as in takes no action, for an entire turn as he uses his inherent mind charge skill. To wrap up his moveset, I honestly feel like he should have had some type of sleep-inducing skill, even though that could have gotten annoying. But overall, I appreciate how Hypnos has no physical skills, since the god himself was no physical warrior. Lastly, the physical design of his persona resembles the most common depiction of the Greek god, as a young man with two protruding wings. And of course, we can't forget the most symbolic part, the persona's drowsy posture where he appears to just be lazily hanging. The fact that Takaya basically just falls unconscious for a bit between his defeat in Tartarus and the arrival of Nyx is so fitting, and then in the end, he peacefully accepts his coming death for the final time, appearing like he's just falling asleep. Alright, that's a wrap on Straga's personas. If this video was enjoyable, please like it, share it, and comment to let me know whether you like Moros or Hypnos better. The next analysis in this series will examine our boy Akihiko's personas, so consider subscribing so you don't miss out. And until next time, take care. See ya!